Okay, so welcome everyone to AMATIC's 2020 webinar series, Creating a Community of Learners. Maria Anderson, Ellen Eischen, Behnaz Rouhani, and Paula Talley. This will be moderated by Nancy Sattler. This webinar is sponsored by TIPSY, Transforming Post-Secondary Education in Mathematics. The views expressed by the presenters are not necessarily the views of AMATIC, and any commercial products mentioned are not endorsed by AMATIC. The McGraw-Hill Higher Education is the sponsor of the 2020 AMATIC webinar series. And I will stop sharing my screen, Nancy, and turn it over to you and the panel.
Thank you very much, Pat, and welcome all of you. We find ourselves in some crazy times. And today we have a panel of women who I consider experts to help us all navigate these uncharted waters as we continue in this pandemic. So first of all, I'd like to ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves by sharing with us what your favorite icebreaker is for a discussion board, and let us know how you have your students introduce themselves to you. And Maria?
Yeah, so one of my favorite discussion board posts to start off the semester and get to know each other is a modification of the introduction, the introduce yourself post. And since it's a math class, I call it the set of me. And what they have to do is collect a set that represents themselves in their apartment or their house and take a picture of it and share the picture as their discussion board post. And so in that, you'll see pictures of their, they'll include pictures of their families or their hobbies or, the things they like to do, their video game controller, like whatever it is that makes them unique. It fosters a lot of conversation and oh, hey, I like that too. So it really starts to help form that sense of community without the same old boring introduce yourself post that so many people use in online classes. I put a link in the chat if you want to see a picture of my set of me or instructions about anything that I just mentioned. I think Paula's going to go next.
Yes, I've been teaching mathematics for over 23 years at the college level, and I'm currently an adjunct at Austin Community College, and I'm also full-time at the Charles A. Dana Center. One of the things that I do in my discussion board as an icebreaker complements what Maria does. I do just a video introduction, just basically telling some things about me, and I'll show my my dachshunds, especially virtual, but my dachshunds stay by me constantly. So I'll show videos of my dachshunds and give them a little bit of background about me as a person, and then I encourage them to post those their videos of themselves with finding something that is important to them and posting those and getting to see those. I have synchronous classes right now, so I encourage them to do that before the semester starts, so they get a sense of who's in the classroom on that first day.
Thanks, Paula. Behnaz?
Yes, so the way I do it is that I have a discussion forum. It's called Let's Get Acquainted. And in that, first I will go ahead and introduce myself, that I'm a full-time professor at the Georgia State University Perimeter College, how long I've been teaching, about my background, and I say a little bit about the challenges I had to face growing up studying mathematics, and what is the reason for my passion for mathematics and teaching. And that inspires them. They come back and let me know, wow, we cannot believe how far you have come, what challenges you have conquered. And that causes some interaction between them and me. And that's a great starter for me. And I've been teaching for the past 27 years.
Thank you. Ellen?
Hi, my name's Ellen Eischen, and I'm an associate professor at the University of Oregon. And today, a lot of my responses will be in the context of a new course I designed and taught entirely remotely this spring called Math and the Creative Process, a Participatory Exploration of Number Theory. And this is a course designed to get students, it's a highly interactive course designed to get students early in their educations interacting with math and doing creative abstract problem solving. And there's also an emphasis on building skills to explore and communicate about topics in pure math. So it's pretty different from what most of the students have experienced before. And I think when I'm having students introduce themselves, whether remotely or in person, one thing I want to do is get them interacting with each other right away. And I also try to get them interacting with something that at least gives them the flavor of the material of that course. And so in the case of this course, which also has a big visualization component, in fact, it culminates with students creating pieces that will be on display in Oregon's Jordan Schnitzer Museum of Art. It's been postponed to next spring due to the pandemic. And so I had them, I'm gonna put something in I'm gonna put an example in the chat. So I have a link from my webpage here. I, for this course, had students first share who they are, then I had them choose a math image. The AMS has a great gallery of math imagery. So I said if they had an image they like, they could go with that. But many of these students have not seen a lot of creative images of math. So I said you can also go to this gallery and pick one, share it. Why do you share it? You don't have to understand it, but just getting started talking about this. And in addition, I had students read A Mathematician's Lament by Paul Lockhart, which gets you away from the idea of math as formulaic and paint by numbers and more toward math as art, and had students share their impressions. And they had to respond to at least one, other student, but many students just kept going. It was like being a fly on a wall in a dorm. I heard, I learned a lot about my students from this, and in fact used some of their preferences for images to inform my choices of what I suggested for projects later in the term.
Thank you. Last spring, many faculty started the semester in the classroom, and then in March had to shift to remote. At that point in time, they'd already gotten to know their students. Come fall, many of you will be starting teaching remotely. So my question to the panelists are, what do you do? How do you create connections with the students that you've never met before? Banaz, you have some words of wisdom?
Yes, absolutely. I'm very passionate about this topic of creating emotional connection between teachers and students, because if you are emotionally connected with your students, when we connect emotionally, then we learn better, we understand better, and we remember things a lot deeper. And so here are a few things that we can try. The first one is to make deliberate effort to be enthusiastic, positive, and optimistic about student success, even if we know that the student is really not doing that well, but we can be trying to be enthusiastic about their success. And who knows, maybe a little encouragement will make them become successful in the course. So the key is deliberate effort to be enthusiastic. The second one is that sometimes we as faculty, we get bored of teaching that same course for a long time. So it's good to look for ways to reinvigorate the passion and then share that with the students, saying that, for instance, it was during the spring break, I really didn't know what to do. So here it is, this math software that I have learned about, and I want to share some of the stuff that I have learned with you. So so they would know that you're on the path to learning. The other thing is to share a bit about yourself. Bring personal examples. Share why you went into your field. And I have seen great results about that, because as students, they really they are curious about your background. Where are you from? how did you decide to become a math professor? I constantly tell them that I wasn't born mathematician. I worked hard for it. And to be honest with you, I wasn't good in math either when I was in elementary school. So it was my mom's hard work and effort that I am who I am now. So then you connect with them emotionally in that sense. They know that, well, after all, you're a human being just like them. I have gone through the same challenges that they are going through. So, and I let them know that we are in this together. I am here to get them to win, to pass this course with flying colors. Strive to be likable. I know that's not the right word for a math professor. We're the least liked professors probably on the face of the earth, but we can try and make eye contact even when we are, I know now with this pandemic, we are in Zoom or WebEx, just make the eye contact, have your picture on, smile, and develop and convey a supportive and encouraging attitude. I have been teaching online for the past 19 years, and I can tell that I build the same connection with those online students as I have built with my face-to-face students when I was teaching in a brick and mortar. So it is possible to make that connection. The other thing is to give students some control. Give them choices. This way, they will have greater interest in their task. For instance, can they choose from a range of assignments? Can they help decide on some of the grading criteria or class policies? These are all it. Host a live session to truly connect and take them on a tour of the course. And this is what I do, and they love it. I take them on a tour of the course and just tell them everything that I want them to know that is actually in the syllabus, because I know for sure they will not be reading the syllabus, but they will watch this video, which is a tour of the course. Email class before class starts. Use hopeful and optimistic language. What I do is that twice a week, I post announcements to the announcement portion of the course. And beginning of the week, I let them know about what is due, you know, everything that they need to be studying. And I end the week with some words of wisdom, not from me, but some quotes, some motivational quotes. And I have heard great results from students. They say that at the end of the hard day, when I come home and I read your comments, that really boosts my morale. It encourages me. And I immediately send those quotes to my friends in social media. So they really read these, and it has been very, very helpful.
Thank you so much. And Paula, could you tell us what you do?
Sure. So building on the discussion forum before the class starts, I also have them post about their math experience. Teaching at the community college, the average age of a community college student is, I don't know what it is today, but it used to be around 27 years old. And so they have that anxiety when they first come into the course that they can't do this, they're scared, they're afraid. So posting about their math backgrounds gives them a sense of who's in the class, their math backgrounds, like they're not the only ones that's been out of school for 10 years. And it helps them feel like up front that, okay, I'm not alone in this course. And then a simple activity on the first day is again, I teach synchronously. I send them to a breakout. In the breakout, they're to do an introduction about themselves. And with that group, find one thing in common and then come back and share as the whole group. The interesting piece to that, it seems like it's so simple, but that one thing they find in common, it's often that's something similar that the other groups have also identified. So finding that commonality, creating that sense of community, creating that sense of these students in this class are like me and we can do this math together, just right off the bat, build those relationships.
Thank you. Let's talk about breakout groups in virtual meetings. How do you ensure full participation and community formation? Or I'm sorry, in these virtual meetings? How do you ensure that everyone can access what you're doing, even if they have bad internet connection. I often see in front of my screen, I live in a small town, it says unstable internet connection. What do you do for those students when you want to use breakout rooms and have group discussions? Maria?
Yeah, so one of the things that I do that I think is really fun, and we might just try it here just for fun. I'm going to ask you to share your favorite kind of word problem in the chat, but don't hit enter, right? Don't hit enter until I say 3, 2, 1, go, okay? So type out what your favorite type of word problem is, like your favorite example, your favorite context. Don't do anything until I say so. Let's see if everybody can follow directions. Three, two, one, go. There we go. It's as simple as that. I think for a lot of students, the best thing we can do for them is give them something very low tech to use. And even if all they have is audio, we can put problems up or ask them to do problems. Make sure you always read your problems out loud if you put something up on the screen so they can hear it. And have them hold their answers until you say to press enter. That way every student has a chance to share what they're doing with you, and they can see all of the other responses from all of the other students in the class. It gives you a very real sense of whether everybody's on the same page or not, too. So I call this 3, 2, 1, go. It's really simple, works with all sorts of problems. And a slight modification on this is to do a 3, 2, 1, go. When you have some that have video, as long as some of them have video, it can work. You can say 3, 2, 1, go, and they can share their whiteboard with the class like this, right? And so I actually have students now, we have whiteboard as a requirement for the class, a little portable whiteboard. We don't use a textbook, so it's pretty cheap requirement. It costs about $8 to $10. And we use those so that everybody has kind of a low-tech solution. I use a marker and a board, and an easy way to share. When they go to breakout rooms, they can share in the same way. They can just hold up their whiteboard. So that helps if they have video camera. But even if they don't have a video camera, as long as somebody does, they can talk about the math in the breakout room. They can say, show me that board again. What if we change this? What if we change this, right? They can still be a participant, an active participant in those breakout rooms. The other thing that's really important about breakout rooms, if you use them, is to remember that good pedagogy is to actually do a think, pair, share. Not just send them to a group to do work, but let them actually try the problem first so that when they get to the group, they are ready to actually talk to each other. So I often use a 3, 2, 1, go first. And then if I discover we have like 2 groups of answers there, I'll say, we don't seem to have agreement on the answer here. So how about we do a breakout room and you guys can discuss and come to consensus on what the correct answer could be. When you send them to a breakout room, then they are ready to talk right when they show up. So they've done the think in the main room, they do their pair in the breakout room, and then they come back to do a share with you, right? And see if we've got a consensus then. And so I think the biggest thing that can go wrong with breakout rooms is simply not having them think first. If you send a group of people to a room to discuss and none of them has had a chance to try the problem, it's silence. It's just a silent room, and then nobody wants to break the ice. Nobody wants to be the first one to talk. So it's really important to follow the same pedagogy that we would hopefully be doing in a classroom when you use breakout rooms and community work in remote teaching.
Thanks, Maria. I really like that 3, 2, 1 idea. I could use that in my classes. Ellen, can you share what you're doing?
Yeah, so maybe I'll start actually building on what Maria says, and then I'll talk about some other things I do as well. So like Maria, I am also very careful with this think, pair, share. And since this past spring, I was teaching a course which was really unusual for many of the students. They're doing this unusual creative problem solving, preparing for a museum exhibit, so really being put out of their comfort zone, even more so in ways I'll get into in a moment. I would have them write on the discussion board first. And I actually never did that when I taught in person, and I wish I had now, because I think even in-person students might be more willing to share and be vulnerable if they've been able to first flesh things out in writing and see what other students have done. So I use discussion board first, then we come to class. I'll put people in breakout rooms, usually I found about 4 students usually worked well. They discuss there, and then we come to the class, and I'll often drop in on the different groups, depending on what the topic is. If it's more of a solving a math problem from a homework type thing instead of discussion board, like Binaz was saying, it's really important for students to have a sense of control and some agency in it. So sometimes they'll say, okay, each room is going to have a particular problem, and you can decide which one you want to go discuss from that homework set. So I also use two approaches that send students even more out of their comfort zone. One is, I really like improvisational theater. I was a postdoc at Northwestern University outside of Chicago, which has a really big improv community. So I studied improv for a few years, and I've started integrating some of the techniques from improv into my courses, not to be funny. I'm not a particularly funny person, but a lot of the exercises that arise in improv, for instance, in games that you might see if you watch something like Whose Line Is It Anyway, can be adapted to help people collaborate better, listen better, build on others' ideas, support each other, build an inclusive environment. And so I use some of these right from the get-go with my students to help them begin collaborating with each other. If people are interested at the end, I'm happy to share what some of those are. And then in addition, this term, I had a long-term project, lasted about 8 weeks. Students were working in a group on a project preparing for a museum. At the end, I had these printed on metal or paper, depending on the group, and they're all sitting in the museum now. Eventually they'll be displayed. And so students also got to form, in addition to the short-term relationships and the randomly in these different breakout rooms, they also had a long-term ongoing relationship with another group of students, which I think was particularly valuable right now during the pandemic, where maybe some of that which is built into the university setting normally was suddenly lost. And this whole course was entirely remote from beginning to end. So later today I'll talk about how these groups formed and how I made sure things moved around along at a reasonable pace, and what I did to make sure that students could stay on track even if they couldn't access the internet consistently.
So I've been teaching online for a really long time, and I have gotten a lot of great ideas from faculty who have been forced to teach online. I have often said that my students that are online learners have time to think about what they're saying because I'm not over their head and they're not seeing the clock tick, that they can take as much time as they want. So there are certain benefits that we might have from allowing our students to post things in their own time. But some of the things that we've done in the classroom all of the time, it's kind of difficult to think about transferring that over to an online environment. And one of those, Ellen, you talked about group projects, but how have you handled all of that, transitioning from your classroom now to remote learning?
Yeah, so I've actually found how to be a lot more deliberate with the remote setting. It worked well. Oh, I should note also, I collected feedback at the end of the term, and the most popular items in the feedback were the breakout rooms, all these different things tied to the project. So it was museum visualization, museum write-up, forming collaboration teams, and a session we had with a consultant named Heather Barnes who worked with students on working on their museum write-ups. So I'll talk a little bit about the process. Like with anything, I think it's most important to establish expectations for students from the beginning. And so I'm going to focus on that most of all right now. So in week 3 of the course, the students have been together for a little while, but not super long. I started out by posted a list. This is actually linked from, let me put a link, and I'll try to link to the correct, I'll post to everyone this time. I accidentally didn't include everyone. So there's this site. I'm putting up some material for my course in case other people find it useful. So I shared with my students some projects that I had planned in advance that would be doable, ways for them to explore. And I'd been introducing the math concepts behind this, such as like modular arithmetic, during the first 2 weeks of the course. And so they had to choose something, but they also needed to form a team. So I gave them these projects. Oh, and I made a point of integrating some of their ideas that they'd shared on the message board during the first 2 weeks and building on those to help them feel like they had some say in what was going on. And these really did influence my ideas. I had all these ideas in my mind before I started teaching the class, and then I'd get inspired by what they were writing on the discussion board. So this document, choosing a math topic, and in addition to choosing this topic, I had them brainstorm 2 skills or things that they like to do that could be helpful to their team. So this is a 100 level course. So most of the students are here to try to fill a requirement. Some are there because they love math and they've taken a bunch of math, but most are there like they're not super confident in math yet. So 2 skills or things that would be helpful. For example, do you like writing about math? Are you good at explaining math to others, etc.? This is all in that document. And then I said, is there a skill or trait you hope someone else will have? For many of my students, like they start out, they're just like, I don't know what to do. There's no way I can do this. So I want them to be thinking of what can I contribute, because everyone has something they can contribute. And then rather than being like, I don't know how to do this thing, okay, pose it as what could somebody else bring to the project. So this was all happening on the discussion board. And then I also had them name at least 3 topics they're interested in. And I had them email me. I said they could contact each other offline if they want, or outside of the discussion board if they wanted, to try to form teams. And they'd been in breakout rooms a lot, so meeting each other during the first 2 weeks. So they also had some sense of what it was like to work with some of their classmates. And then I had them email me preferences, and amazingly, they all formed into teams. Like I got these, I got emails or through the survey I sent them requests, and so it made the formation of the projects super great for me. And so I put them in teams this way, and then I alternated during our 10-week quarter. I alternated between every other week. There was sort of a more normal style problem set due to bring everyone back to work. And in the weeks that was in the even number weeks. And in the odd number weeks, we had assignments due tied to this project. So after they formed these teams in week 3, week 5, they had to make a detailed progress report. Week 7, their visualizations were due. Week 9, they had a mathematical description due, and then in week 10, well, end of week 9, beginning of week 10, had a remote guest from Chicago who does a lot with STEM communication, has worked in museums a lot. Her name's Heather Barnes, and she worked with my students to write engaging introductions appropriate for museum, and then they did a final presentation at the very end of the term. And like I said, when I requested feedback, most of the most popular items were all items that were tied to this project or working in breakout rooms. And so I put a little bit of that on my webpage, but I will put more on it later on. And one key thing here is you have to remember to give time students, since the remote environment and not everyone is able to connect outside of class time. This course had a scheduled time, so I'd give students time to work in breakout rooms during class, a lot of time on certain days, and then I would visit the different rooms. But I may also make clear to them that explicitly that my expectation was that they were going to struggle and get confused, so that was part of the process, so they didn't all say, oh no, there's no professor here, I don't know what to do.
Thank you, Ellen. And Banaz, I know that you do things with projects. Could you share with us?
Sure. Sure. When I was teaching math for pre-service teachers, their final project was just come up with a project that how to teach a lesson. So I put them into groups, or they decided on who they want to go with. And they were meeting in our WebEx, and they were collaborating there. And of course, for making the video, I gave them very clear instructions on how to make video. And some of them, they were making the video using a little board, just like what whiteboard, what Maria was just showing us. And those videos were posted to the discussion forum. And it was a beautiful scene, the lessons that each one of them were creating. And of course, it was due 1 week before the final, and they were sharing it all there. And it was wonderful, wonderful experience for all of them.
Thank you. So we've heard a little bit about discussion boards, but discussion boards in remote learning can really turn out to be the meat or the heart of the course. So I know that some of you have used discussions that give students agency in their community participation. How do you do that, Paula?
I have to admit, I have really struggled with discussion boards and really tried to adapt over time to find them very, to make them more productive and have the students really get something out of them and participate. So a couple different things. One I've learned is on, when you have a topic, maybe give them a couple of topics that they can choose from. So that way they're responding to something that connects with them. An application problem or finding some kind of real relevant, real world situation to put in there. But the biggest thing that I found helpful is giving them agency in the way they respond. So in discussion forums, sometimes students don't necessarily, especially in a math course, don't necessarily feel comfortable typing into the discussion board what they're trying to do. So I give them the option, do they want to do a video response of how they want to respond to the question? Do they just want to add an audio? Do they want to, upload a picture of their work? So really giving them the agency and choosing the topic that interests them, and then the mode that they actually respond in discussion board. And to get the responses going, just a tidbit that I learned too, I used to say, discussion boards, everything's due on, I'm randomly saying Friday. But it's hard to get the responses going because everybody's posting everything on Friday. So thinking about the timing of the posting too, when do you have your original post? When do you have the responses due to your fellow classmates? So just the modes of interaction and the choices of the discussion prompts.
Thanks, Paula. I know when I went to an AMATIC conference in Austin one time, the waitress said, "What are all these people doing in town?" I said, "We're here for a math conference." And she said, oh, let me write down a link for you. And I was like, okay. And she said, my job, the task that I was given in my math class was to create a video. And we did this really neat Pythagorean theorem thing. And I want you to see it. She was so excited. So the videos, students can really get into doing those videos. Maria, what do you have to share?
So I did a lot of thinking about discussion boards last year, ironically. I set a goal to myself to come up with 100 ways to do active learning in online math classes because I wanted to give a presentation on it. And I ended up doing a presentation on quite a few that are discussion board related. And so I'll pass along a few tips and then a link to that slide deck from the AMATIC talk that I did last year, which has a lot more ideas and details on it. One thing I'll say is that good discussion boards require unique initial posts. If you're going to have students who are all going to reply with the same thing in their initial post, don't do it. It's an assignment, not a discussion. So there's two ways you can handle that. One is to get a unique initial post, you almost have to approach it like a scavenger hunt. Like every student has to go find something that starts the discussion in a different way, right? The other alternative to that is to just have smaller groups for the discussion board. So most learning management systems have a way that you can create the assignment and then say, I want the discussion boards to be in groups of 4, for example, which is a good size. And that way, at least 3 people participate, and 1 person's probably MIA at any given time, which is normal. If you teach online, you know that. So if you just take something that would not have a lot of unique posts to it and break it into smaller groups, then the whole group in each individual instance can have the whole discussion without repeats. You really want to avoid the conga line of replies, which is like one person solves the problem and everybody else says, oh yeah, I agree. Right? That doesn't help anybody, and that's not fostering discussion. So the way you get around that is with what I call structured discussion boards, where you tell them what the initial post should be, what reply 1 should be, and what reply 2 should be. And let me just give you an example. So one example is like to help students prepare for a quiz. You could start a thread with every learning objective that's going to be on the quiz. So maybe you start with 6 threads, each one with a learning objective on it. And then for their first reply to a thread, the students have to pose a problem that goes with that learning objective. So they're essentially writing a quiz question that goes with that learning objective, and they can't repeat a problem that somebody else has. They have to think of a unique problem that goes with that learning objective, which forces them to go back through their homework and assignments and look around for what kinds of problems might be, you know, in that narrow field of vision for the learning objective. And then once that's done, that's like the initial one due, then you have every student go in and answer one of the questions and check somebody else's answer, show how to check it, not just check it, but explain how to check it. And so that way you've essentially written a quiz prep out of this discussion board. But what you've done is provided the structure so that every initial post is unique and that every student knows what to do for those responses. Everybody gets a chance to solve a problem. Everybody gets a chance to check or show how to check a problem or solve it some other way, right? And so you're creating kind of an even playing field. Everybody has to do the same tasks. So there's none of this like, oh yeah, I agree. Oh yeah, I agree. Which students all know is like the busy work that sits underneath of probably at least 75% of the discussion boards out there. They're just busy work to students. There's no learning happening. And so I think in math in particular, we have to create structured discussion boards in a lot of cases to avoid this kind of problem. You can do another one with small groups where you basically just choose, if you have groups of 4, choose 4 problems that each group is going to do. Everybody's first post is solving the problem they were assigned. So actually assign the problems to the 4 people in the group so that you avoid a lot of like who's doing what. And then the second post is go in and show how to either check, actually the second and third post, be go in and show how to check or solve it another way. And so everybody actually interacts with 3 of the 4 problems, right? And you don't have any me tooing, you don't have, you know, like one person solving it and 30 people replying to it because they're inside of small pods answering the questions. So I find that those little tweaks, making structured discussion boards instead of free-for-all discussion boards, helps quite a bit to get the conversation going, the talking going, the learning going. If you can't point to a learning objective for a discussion board, you should ask yourself, why are we doing this discussion board? Students have so much going on in their lives right now. Do we really want to just give them busy work to do? I mean, if there's no learning happening in that discussion, do something else, right? Don't make them do a discussion just to have one, right? I'm going to put the link to the talk here in the chat and let somebody else talk about this a little bit. I'll just grab this here. And I'll let Nancy go on to the next person.
Okay, well, thanks, Maria. And, you know, you talked about having students give feedback to one another. Banaz, I think you have some, a little spin-off on student feedback to share with us.
Absolutely. So what I have found is that students learn to take charge of their learning by giving input on how class is going and what needs to be changed. So they are gratified for the opportunity to raise their concerns and view as the way the instructor attempts to foster the community life in the online class. The willingness of the faculty to value the student's point of view creates a trusting environment in the course, and it enables the instructor to really understand the experience and struggles of the students. So to ensure effectiveness of the course a couple of times during the semester, I formally gather student input through anonymous surveys. And I repeat, those are anonymous surveys. And these surveys provide me with important information about students' level of satisfaction and their expectations. It also serves as a self-check to me as an instructor, and I make adjustments in my courses as needed. So students also, they're happy because when they see that the suggestions are implemented. So my mid-semester survey solicits students' response to the following statement. And here is the statement. It's just one long statement. Things I wish you would stop. Things I hope you keep doing. Things I don't understand. And during the second half of the course, could you ... And students complete their responses during the week before the midpoint of the semester. And after reading the student responses to the mid-semester survey, I provide the response to their queries to the entire class. And in my response, I first thank them and then point out those ideas that will improve the course quality and student learning will be implemented. They get happy when they see that I listen to what they have said. I keep telling them these suggestions have to be constructive suggestions. Now, the end of semester survey solicits the response to the statement. How did you like this online class? Any comments? Was your experience an enjoyable one? How can I improve this course? Now, this technique can be used to determine how students perceive their learning by identifying what they like and dislike about the course, what learning activities they think produce the greatest amount of learning. And I have learned so much by doing these surveys. I've been doing this for the past 15 years. And as a result of these comments, I have been able to work on my course design and the things they have suggested to me. So I know it is a little time consuming, but it's really worthwhile effort as a help to me.
Thank you, Behnaz. And for those of you who have never taught online until this past spring, if you listen to what Behnaz said, she's been teaching online for 19 years. And so she's learned a lot of things in those years, and she's still learning. And so I think that's a lesson that we can all take with us, is there's always something that we can learn, and don't be afraid of trying something and asking your students what they would like to see. And Ellen, can you tell us, you have some peer review that you use. Can you share that with us?
Yes, so as I mentioned, every other week, my students had a more traditional sort of exercise set due, but there was a lot of emphasis on math communication here. These were not generally just not generally like problem sets at all. And so I used Canvas's peer review feature. I'll post a sample rubric here. So students were not assigning points to each other or anything like that. They just, these questions, and it was double blind. So the student reviewing and the student getting reviewed didn't know who each other were. They were randomly assigned. There were 5 of these assignments during the term, so each student completed 10 peer reviews during the term. And this is an experiment. I actually, I was enthusiastic about it, but I didn't know how my students would be. They got really into it. And for instance, I had this comment on the anonymous feedback I solicited at the end of the term. The peer feedback was the best part of the course, since we could look at other ways to do a problem, and we were accepting feedback positively. And maybe it sounds pretty bad that like the feedback was the best part of the course, but the student was very enthusiastic, talking about all these things they liked, but the feedback was somehow the highlight for this very positive student. And I think one thing that helped was my students interact a lot with each other already, so they're used to interacting, and this is just another form of that, but it also really put a lot of energy into getting buy-in. So I think with anything, you need to, if you're doing something that's different, and this is different for most of my students, justify why you're doing it. So when I posted on Canvas, I gave them an optional video to watch and a link to a document about why peer review is good. I also told them several times that when you get the feedback, unlike in a normal class, you're now getting feedback from more people than just your professor. And if you're trying to get good at communicating, it's not really enough to have a dialogue with just one person back and forth. What does the professor want from me? Okay, have I achieved that? But do people understand what I'm saying? So now they're getting more feedback about how they're communicating. And in addition, I emphasize that the process of giving feedback can also help you reflect on your own work. And the third thing, though, I did for buy-in was based on my own experience. So I actually got interested in doing this kind of peer review years ago when Coursera, which makes massive online courses, these MOOCs, near the beginning, I took a bunch of MOOCs through Coursera because I just like that kind of thing. And the sequence I was taking there used a form of peer review. And while I was skeptical in advance as a student, I actually found it also to be one of the best parts of my experience in the course, being able to see other students' work, comment it on it, and also see other students' impressions of my work. So I also let them know that I had experience with this. This wasn't just some random thing I was doing because it's a feature in Canvas and hey, let's see how it goes. But there was a real point. And it seems, in addition to the anonymous feedback, I did have several students just tell me in office hours at various times that they had found it really helpful to see other students' works and what it looks like to explain your answer. So
okay.
maybe I will stop at that. If you have questions, I can answer that more later.
Okay, thank you. I have taught online since the early 90s, and my students have always chosen to take an online class. This summer, when I was teaching college algebra, the only way a student could take college algebra was to take it online. So some of my students were not happy that they had to take the class online, and I'm used to my students making that choice. So some of these students felt like they were being held hostage. This is going to happen to an awful lot of students this fall. So my question to you is, how are you going to embrace these students and bring them and make them into a part of your community of learners when you know they are not happy being there in your class remotely? Paula, do you have any advice?
Yeah, I think one of the bigger pictures here, beyond creating the community of learners within your classroom and connecting with each other through the community, some of the community activities that we talked about, is really helping them feel that there's a sense of a community on the campus. There was actually an article posted yesterday, I think it was an Inside Higher Ed, talking about the mental health. So if you think about this, these students who are coming to us as hostages in the online environment, they don't know where to go to get the help. They don't know the campus resources. They don't know necessarily how to navigate to find tutoring services. And they don't know where to look to find information about housing and food insecurities of how they can get help. So I think one of the big things to connect them, to help them feel that they're not just a hostage in a virtual environment, is really be explicit in your learning management system and in your syllabus about where to find these different resources. Make it very easy for them to find those resources so they can seek out that help and we don't lose them because of things that are outside of our control. Help them feel that they can actually still connect to your campus community. That's one of the biggest pieces I think I would suggest, working with the students who do not choose to be online.
Okay, thanks, Paula. And Maria, you've had vast experience with online learners and creating communities. What is your advice?
So I think that I'm going to go back to basics here just a little bit. I think a lot of students, the reason they have so much hesitation about online learning is because they've experienced something really, really bad. whether that was an instructor in a regular class who like clearly could not use an online or a learning management system, or they signed up for some online course and it turned out the teacher had no idea what they were doing, or in March, they suddenly were switched to a new format and it was clear the instructor had no idea what they're doing. So they are approaching us with a sense of trepidation because of actual experience they've had in many, many cases. So I think what's important is that we kind of look at this as kind of a pyramid of student needs, kind of like a Maslow's hierarchy of needs, only I'm going to call it Maria's hierarchy of online course design. Here we go. Again, I'll just say that using one of these is really helpful. So you guys can read this the correct way, right? It's not backwards? Okay. So at the bottom here, I have organization. If a student logs into your course and it is completely unorganized and they can't figure out what's going on, you just lost them for the rest of the semester. They're going to be hostile. They're going to be upset. Like when they go in, even if you only have the first unit open, that unit had better be organized. They better be able to find the learning, find the assessment, find everything. If you don't reach this bottom part of the pyramid, it's over. No amount of anything else going to save you, right? And so if you've been like meaning to prep for that online class that begins in, a couple weeks and you haven't sat down yet, sit down and do it, because that's going to make or break you. I think the next thing that's important is cadence. You have to establish a regular cadence for what happens every week. And things need to happen every week. You can't just have a midterm and a final like you might do with the regular class. Like you need to have things due every week because they need to get frequent feedback, which brings us to the next one, which is communication. They need to hear regular communication from you, have regular communication with their colleagues. They need to know that you exist and have accountability to you and make a connection to you. But of course, you're not going to get any kind of connection with them if you don't have organization and some kind of cadence or frequency of the assignments. Then I think relevance is like fantastic. If you can find relevance between what you're teaching and what's happening to them in life, that is always going to help things. And then finally, I actually have at the very top here, digital activities. I think that digital activities are actually the least important thing we figure out how to do right now. If you can't nail the rest of this stuff, finding a really clever Kahoot or designing a really interesting activity for 10 minutes of one class is not going to save the class. You do those things when you've gotten through everything else in the pyramid and you have the time to do those things and do them well. If you just find activities and don't have the time to like actually try them yourself or see if they're decent, or you're just doing it for busy work, it doesn't help anything. We used to teach classes with no technology, with a textbook, paper and pencil, no calculators, etc., right? And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm going back to some really simple technology right now, because of all the things they have that are not working in their lives, all the technologies they're having to use for all the classes, if I can just give them a simple, use the chat, show me your whiteboard, turn in assignments all on paper, but no, if I can keep it to some very simple things and those things happen regularly, they start to feel a sense of relief that like, okay, I know how this is going to go. I can see the road in front of me. I can see what I have to do. I feel comfortable, right? And I think we're all still in emergency mode, and that we need to take a little bit of recognition of that, and that you're not going to be able to do everything you've ever wanted to do in an online class this fall. Like, do what gets you at least the bottom rungs of that pyramid.
Thanks so much. Now here's a really interesting question, and this is for all of you. What's something that you thought that was going to work in creating community and failed miserably? And what did you learn from it? I often tell my students they can learn a great deal from their mistakes.
I'll let somebody else go, otherwise I'll talk.
Anybody have anything to share?
I wanted to add something onto the previous question though, just adding on to what Maria just said. So if I could just do that quickly. I just wanted to add also that I think sometimes people get tripped up in a new teaching environment because they're like, instead of keeping the goals at the forefront, they're like focused on the process of how they achieve those goals in some other environment. And I think it's important when you're transitioning to teaching remotely to remember what your goals are for your students and then build on what you have. So for example, one of my students was asking why some stuff with modular arithmetic, but what's it good for? And like, if you look at, well, I don't know, I just went to Tipsy Math, but I went to Oregon with them. Lots of websites, if you go to them, they're secure. In the address bar where you type the URL, there's a little lock and you can click on it. And when you click on that, there's a thing that says certificate or show certificate. You click on that, and inside of there, you see something that says RSA, which I tell them is using number theory. It's right there. But that's not a thing I would ever do in the classroom. I wouldn't be like, now everyone bury your head in a screen. Like if and when we're back in person, I'm not going to be like, now we're going to get our computers out because it's this thing I did remotely. But it's a thing taking advantage of what's there. So I think it's really important to just keep the goals there, but build the process from what you have in front of you rather than what worked in some totally different environment.
Maria, did you have anything you wanted to say?
I wanted to share with you my most famous failure of communication with students, which actually turned out to be a really good life lesson. I had a class where I was sharing graphs like every day in class, and they really liked it. And I had students say, well, what are we supposed to do when the semester is over? How will we get any news if we don't get your graphs at the beginning of every day? And I was like, oh, I'll make an email list and send it to you. And they all looked at me like, what's an email list, right? Which is when I realized that none of them get any communication in their normal lives by email, except for like really formal things like from school, right? And so I actually switched and learned how to put stuff up on Instagram and other platforms specifically to adjust to their mode of communication, right? And from that, some of you know that this little project where we look at a graph every day was born. And it was born from students telling me that the way I had originally conceived it was like totally wrong, right? But something like that can, listen to your students, listen to what they're telling you. They may be telling you like, not this platform, can we do it somewhere else, right? So anyways, that's it.
Yeah, you know, and that's really interesting you say that, because I've had students tell me that the class has this Facebook discussion group away from the class where they share ideas of what they should be doing, and probably my teaching as well. But there's all different ways of communications, and that I think is really important too for all of us to think about when we're communicating with our students, to say it in different ways so that they don't just get it once, that you don't just post something on the discussion board, but you also send them maybe an email through Canvas or Blackboard or whatever you're using.
May I just add one other thing to this topic?
Sure.
The one point I know Maria went on, talked about communication with students very eloquently. There are a few other points I want to add, and that is make sure that the information we provide to students is digestible, because they are taking the classes online, and we make sure that we break down those directions into smaller bites when necessary, and encourage students to ask clarifying questions if it appears they don't understand it, and make sure that we actively focus on maintaining attitudes of inclusivity. Students more than ever, they need that, they have to feel that they are valued, they are welcomed online. The other thing is students are going through very, very tough times in their lives. So we have to make sure that relationship between them and us is in such a way that they can open up and talk about those embarrassing house or family situations they are in. Maybe we can help them out by reaching out to different departments. And finally, encourage a sense of hope and practice compassion with them.
Inez, that is an excellent closing to our webinar. I thank you all for your participation and your sharing. I was thinking about how I might change what I'm doing in my classroom based on what you said today. And I think I'm a pretty good teacher. They say if you can take one thing, then it's been a worthwhile event. And I have more than one thing that I'm taking with me, and I hope all of you have as well. I thank all of you for your participation. The chat has been really interesting. Lots of good ideas. We'll be saving that chat. You'll be getting it with your link. I thank our panelists and Pat too. It has been an eye-opener. I know we're all going to face some challenges in the fall, and I hope what you've learned today will help make the fall just a little less challenging. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks everybody for attending. See, we're losing attendees real quick. If you, just a few final comments here. Okay, so thank you for attending. If you are not a member of AMATIC, please consider joining. We are on Facebook at facebook.com/AMATIC. There are more webinars, traveling workshops, conferences coming up for more face-to-face or computer-to-computer contact. And we'll be sending out the recording and the chat transcript of this within hopefully sometime later today. Here's the link for the evaluation and the QR code if you use that. One of the questions in the evaluation is the request for a certificate, and I will put this link in the chat. And just once again, thanks Nancy and Ellen and Maria and Paula and Behnaz. If you haven't already done that, ladies, well done. Thank you very much, and thank you all for attending.
Thank you.
Were there any questions that were not answered? Did we get all the questions answered as they came up? You all were doing really well.
Yeah, you guys were doing a tremendous job, and there was only the one that Dave posted in the...
Several people have asked me to talk about the improv. So, and I just got another one. Maybe I should answer that.
Go ahead.
Okay.
I have to run to another meeting, but I'll see you guys later.
Yeah.
Okay.
See you all later. Bye-bye.
You should totally answer it, Ellen.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Were you about to say something, Pat?
I was just going to say I've still got the recording going, so even though people are leaving, it'll be in the recording.
Okay. Yeah. So I maybe I'll just say a little bit. First of all, those if you've watched things like Whose Line Is It Anyway, those games they're playing are derived from exercises that were originally developed by someone named Viola Spolin and someone else named Neva Boyd, basically as games for kids to improve communication and the way that they play and assimilate different groups of kids together. And then actors realized those were useful, and they've been kind of built on and built on. But so the idea that these exercises I'm going to describe can be used also for building community in a classroom is not actually crazy. It doesn't originate with me. It's just an idea that's been kind of forgotten over time. So one example of an exercise I might use, which is a little easier for me to describe over Zoom than some others, is called One Word Story. And so the way this goes, the way it's in the classroom is actually a how-to. So I'll ask someone, for actually one of you who's still on, what is something common that we all know how to do that we could describe how to tell someone how to do? Like how to tie your shoe, but not how to tie your shoe. So could someone, boil water. Okay, so how do you boil water? So in the kitchen, I want to teach someone how to boil water. And so what I would do is first demonstrate this in a room with my students, then put them in breakout rooms, and then we'll come back and talk about the point is. But very briefly, I'm going to just play. Nancy, you're going to be my volunteer because you're the only other person I can see here. So if that's
Okay.
So I'd ask us for a student volunteer normally. And this is going to be an exercise in listening, and it's kind of silly. And we're going to tell everyone how to boil water. We won't finish right now. I just want to get it off the ground. And so we're going to start, but this is a one-word story, which means we each get one word going back and forth. So we're going to start with this is how you boil water. So I'm going to say this. Nancy is going to say is. I'm going to say how. She's going to say you. I'm going to say boil. She's gonna say water. And then we're gonna start. So I'm gonna say first, and maybe Nancy will say you, and then I say something, and we're gonna put this story together, and we're gonna try to stay on rhythm. So after I say my word, Nancy's not gonna start like looking around trying to come up with like Cuisinart or really start inventing kitchen words. She's just gonna be like water or common things I'm expecting. So this
Is
how?
story.
This, so what we're gonna do is go back and forth telling people how to boil water, one word at a time. Do you have, oh, I should ask if there's questions.
Okay, so then I would say first,
You
turn
on
the
faucet.
to
Make
boiling
water. Okay, anyway, so we would go on like this, and you can see already we're struggling to communicate, just giving one word. So an example of an exercise this is an example of one exercise. It gets kind of funny and crazy, but if you're listening really well, often you can put this together. I put students off in groups, they go do this funny thing. It's low stress because it's very prescribed. They have to come up with a word, but just one word at a time, so it's not putting anyone on the spot like, you know, what do you think about this controversial issue, or act like this character. They just have to give a word. They know what the game is. And when we come back, we talk about skills were used. And normally I would just do this. If I were running a workshop, we'd do this and come back and ask you, but in the interest of time, I'll tell you the sorts of things. People say they had to listen carefully, they had to anticipate, ask if they had trouble. Usually there's somebody who says they had trouble because they were trying to anticipate the whole sentence, but of course their partner doesn't have any idea what's stuck in their head. So they have to anticipate, but also adapt in real time. Something that happens sometimes is different people have different ways of doing something. And so they might both be right ways, but different ways or different orders of operations. So how do you deal with that? I asked, do people make a mistake? Lots of people say they made a mistake. And was it a big deal? And they're like, no, it was funny. And so sometimes like this is an opportunity to talk about making mistakes. And I was like, what do you do? They're like, we just went on. And I'm like, that's what you're going to do in math. Also, you're just going to go on just like you did here. It's just different. You'll be doing a math problem instead of this silly how to boil water problem. And so I use this, but a big part of what I use it for is supporting your partner, saying yes to what they said, and then building on that. And maybe a higher level, we also talk, depending on when we're talking about this in the quarter, we might talk about the balance between interesting words and the filler. Because if Nancy is always like, I'm gonna talk about my Cuisinart, and I'm gonna use the word stove, and whatever, like interesting words, then I'm stuck there with like the, and, is. On the other hand, if all she's saying, if I'm like first, and she's like, you, and I'm like boil, and she's like, and I'm like, okay, get, and she's like, and it's putting a lot of pressure on me. And so we also use that to talk about different issues that it can arise in communication, but in a really low stakes setting, because no one is really invested in probably in what people think here of their ability to boil water. Like everyone probably is like, yeah, people here believe I can boil water, or they don't believe it, but who cares? So it's going to a low stakes setting that's kind of, and it's fun. And that's another key thing, low stakes and fun. And then taking those, and then like lead us discussion, getting these back to a math skill. It takes a while, if you want to do this well, it takes a while to run through it. So I usually only can get through one, I do one per week, because I don't want to spend the whole class on this. I had 4 hours of class time a week, and I would do one of these exercises most weeks. I have another one, someone's asking for your website. I don't have them on a website right now. Ellen, I know Ellen Beamet from grad school. If you email me, I'm happy to like follow up and say a little more, because I'm gonna do a workshop for some people at Idaho in a few weeks teaching some of these, so I'm happy to talk to you about that. I also have one.
There's a question in the chat that's asked if you have students do it in pairs in front of everyone or in breakout rooms.
Yes, the only one in front of people is the one, I'll have a student volunteer to do this with me, but beyond the student volunteer, they're in breakout rooms. So for instance, this would have just 2 people per room. If I have an odd number of students that day, I will pair with one, depending on the exercise. If it's some exercises adaptable to 3 people. And otherwise I'll just drop in silently to different rooms. I'll let them know I'm doing that. But they're in breakout rooms. It's all on their own, but they do report on their process when we come back. So ask how it went. Often the first thing I hear is like, oh, it was fun, or it was really funny. And then I'll say, what skills did you use? The thing you have to keep in mind here is if you're doing something like this, driven by the students. So they might say something surprising, like I have a different exercise to get people comfortable turning on their cameras. And 2 students last term said they actually, and it was like, what was easier, with or without the camera? And most people find easier with, but 2 said it was easier without a camera because they could focus more and they felt distracted when they see other people. So you have to keep in mind, they're just reporting on their skill. You're gonna have a conversation about that. Nothing is right or wrong. They had their experience, they learned something. But there's some things that are kind of predictable here. Like everyone is gonna struggle with like, or at least be working the part of their brain that's like focused on listening, anticipating, supporting, communicating, compensating for mistakes, and so on. But yeah, like Ellen and anyone else, if you email me, I'm happy to follow up afterwards. If people want, you can tell me. I'm also happy to tell you what the exercise for getting cameras on.
Is there a website somewhere?
So I'm making a website right now, but I haven't posted. So I have my website. So this is like, I just started putting stuff from my course on there. It's linked from my main page, but so I'm putting some stuff on this site, and I have a reading list that I'm building, which includes some articles on improv in STEM and pedagogy. So this last one about reading has some articles that I think that I share with students, and I've also done workshops for faculty, like in our ed school. I did one with the Masters of Science teaching students. So they were teachers in training, or training to be teachers, rather. I did a workshop with them this past winter and the winter before as well. And so I'll bring, well, this was back when we were in person, I would bring like copies of those articles, so that, because often people, either they don't know what improv is, or they're like, it's about being on SNL, and like, or they're like, it's about acting, so I must be about projecting my voice, which isn't really what it's about. It's about communicating, collaborating, and listening, which are really important skills that no one can have too much of, and they're really important in the classroom. And so I'll also bring these to get buy-in, so it's not like, oh, who is this crazy mathematician who has this crazy idea about incorporating a theater thing, to establish that like this is actually a thing that some people are doing and using.
Okay, any other questions before we leave you? I hope you all have a great fall semester or quarter. And feel free to share the link.
Thank you. This is fun.
Okay, thanks everyone. Nancy, are we finished?
I think we are.
All right.